I'm really happy this morning to welcome once again Ernest Lima, who's a partner, as you may well all know, from Xray Consulting, based here in Gibraltar. And also, I'd like to extend a really warm welcome for the first time to Dimitrios Psarrakis, who is based in Brussels and is the Xray head of EU and financial strategy. Once again, based out of Brussels, very close to the EU hub there. So welcome to both of you. They're going to be engaging with us this morning for the next 40 minutes or so on a presentation to describe the new AML regime out of the EU, focusing on digital assets particularly. So I'd just like to ask all of you to bear with them as they go through the presentation for the next 40 minutes or so, as I said, and try and keep your Q&A towards the end. By all means, pop through your questions as they do come to your mind. I'll do my best to keep track of them, and then we'll open up that Q&A at the end of the session. At this point, I'd like to hand over to Ernest, who's going to give you a wider introduction about the topic that Xray are going to be presenting to us today here at GIFIA. Without further ado, Ernest, I'd like to hand over the floor to you.
Sorry, mute, it had to happen. Thank you, Alan, and welcome everybody. As Alan said, we're going to be talking about the new EU AML package. We're going to provide an overview. So Dimitrios is going to be the speaker for the presentation. We're going to talk about some of the key considerations around the EU AML package. And Dimitrios is also going to provide some strategic insights at the end. I'll just give a bit of an introduction about us. Most of you, or some of you will know us as Xray Consulting. We're a specialist global regulatory consultancy firm based out of Gibraltar. We are currently a team of 16. We've got some presence in Brussels via Dimitrios. We've got some presence in South America, and we're looking to expand into other jurisdictions. As you probably know, most of us are former regulators and also policymakers. All of us have practical experience with developing regulatory compliance strategies relating to crypto assets and AML more generally. Over the past year, we have been increasing our exposure and focus in the EU. We've established a representative office in Brussels, which is headed by Dimitrios. So I'll just give you a quick introduction about Dimitrios, and then I'll let him take the floor. So Dimitrios is a financial economist, a financial markets innovator. He's a speaker and author. He's got over 17 years of experience in financial regulation generally. He was a financial innovation and monetary policy specialist at the European Parliament for several years, and has been the draftsperson and negotiator of around 14 regulations, directives, and other initiatives at EU levels, covering various topics and sectors. Apart from that, he's published a couple of books, one on the disintermediation of economics and the impact of blockchain in markets and policies, and one on financing and financial reporting for the European SMEs. He's also the co-founder and director of the Brussels Council, and an initiative that inspires to build a common technological innovation area between the EU, Asia, and Africa. He's got a postgraduate degree in finance from Harvard University and an executive diploma in innovation and technology management from MIT. And he's currently completing his executive MBA at the University of Chicago Booth. He remains very close as an advisor to the Vice President of the European Parliament, responsible for innovation, technology, and strategy, and he continues to influence through his expertise the content of the crypto assets and digital finance regulations of the EU. So without further ado, I'll let Dimi take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ernest, for your kind introduction. Very big thank you to GIFIA for this honoring invitation to present today the new anti-money laundering regulation package of the European Union. it's really refreshing being here with you because in a previous life I worked on the field of hedge funds, and my research in Harvard University is about momentum strategies in hedge funds. So I'm really happy being in a group of people like you. And with no further ado, let me share my screen with you and start my presentation because we have a lot of things to cover today. Can you all see my screen? Good. So we are going to speak today about the new anti-money laundering regulation package of the European Union. We will see its different nuances, topics, aspects. We have the opportunity to have an overview of the adoption process, which has its own interest. And we then will discuss the meaning of this new anti-money laundering regulation package for your industry, for the industry in general. And I will end with some strategic insights and strategic considerations about the adoption of this anti-money laundering regulation and its impact in third countries or jurisdictions like Gibraltar. So let me start by showing this. It's not necessarily related to the anti-money laundering regulation because this is the impact of Brexit to us in the European Union. We usually speak about the impact of Brexit to UK, to Gibraltar, but what this Brexit means for us. If you go to the center of this slide, you see two boxes. The move from enhanced coordination to harmonization. This is an institutional and strategic shift for the European Union, and this is something you are going to see coming again and again in the next years. Enhanced coordination means that European Union designs directives and asks the member states to direct their efforts towards a certain target, but every member state had the right to implement the directive according to its own capacity and its own legal and market frameworks. Harmonization is a completely different beast. It's different because it introduces not directives but regulations that compel every member state to implement every letter of this regulation without deviations. And I remember in the beginning of my career in the European Parliament, it was very difficult to convince for harmonization. Everybody wanted coordinated action, but nobody wanted to change or compromise its institutional sovereignty in the member states. But after Brexit, the requirement for further harmonization and the transition from the monetary union to an actual economic union became sine qua non for the survival of the union, especially in its competition with China and the United States. The new technological advancements accelerate this desire, and we are going to see this removal of the Ds. For example, we have anti-money laundering directive and MiFID. Slow by slow, these Ds will be replaced with Rs. And having this in mind, we have the arsenal to understand what happened in July in the European Union with the introduction of the new anti-money laundering regulation. We used to have the anti-money laundering directives, and so far we have 5. But in this context of the institutional and strategic shift of the European Union, in July, the European Commission introduced a package of 4 new pieces of regulation that comprise the anti-money laundering package. These are the anti-money laundering agency, the anti-money laundering regulation, a new anti-money laundering directive, and an updated transfer of funds regulation, which is going to transpose the FATF recommendations to the European Union law. I will start with this. Usually we finish with a slide like this. What are the costs and benefits of this approach? But I want to put in the early slides, what is the idea of the regulators about this new package? They believe that the benefits are more than the costs. And the benefits they have in their mind is that they believe that this further harmonization is a change, which is not necessarily a paradigm shift, but an update. No many regulatory changes, no many surprises, expectation for lifting cross-border frictions. They expect that this will have minimum extra costs for market participants. They believe that this package is going to deliver a better monitoring and better enforcement. And when it goes to the costs, European Union regulators believe that we expect some adaptation costs from the side of the market. And we have, of course, the cost of a brand new EU institution. So we focus on these four aspects, which is all about the harmonization of the anti-money laundering and counter-finance terrorism in the European Union. And let's see it piece by piece. We start with a brand new authority, the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, the remit of which is to transform the AML CFT supervision in the European Union, improve the cooperation of EU financial intelligence units, and have a role much more active compared to the status we had so far. The expectation is that the new anti-money laundering authority is going to be in place by 2024 and fully operational by 2026. So far, we don't have the budget for this, and we don't know the place. We know that Germany wants to take this new authority, and other member states have already said that they want to host this new agency. So, how much new is this new anti-money laundering authority? Well, it is new, but not that much, because much of the role that the AMLA is about to play was previously played by the European Banking Authority and to some extent by the ECB. So the AMLA will play the old role, plus it will have extended capacity, as today European Banking Authority has only 50 people doing this job, whereas the AMLA is expected to have 250 well-trained watchdogs, plus the remit to enforce decisions that currently EBA lacks. You can see it as an institution building effort. The ambition is high, but if you want my insight, there is no much appetite for new institutions in the European Union. This is going to play a significant role in the budget of the new agency, and the low budget is going to affect the staff numbers and the efficiency of its operations. But you know, this is insight sharing, and every insight sharing is probabilistic thinking, and we sometimes prefer certainties. And the only certain thing here is that we have a piece of regulation full of ambition. And ambition number one, AMLA is going to implement the new harmonized rule book, which is the anti-money laundering regulation that we are going to see next. Once the AMLR is in place, AMLA will have the responsibility to supervise directly the highest risk obliged entities, especially if these entities reside to multiple member states. Ambition number two, AMLA will try to ensure group supervision with other regulators, both in European and national level, to ensure consistency. The target of consistency is expected to be achieved also with formal opinions and guidance for the uniform implementation of the new rulebook. And in the same line, AMLA will periodically evaluate the effectiveness of the national regulators and the functioning of the supervisors locally. Also, AMLA will be able to issue guidelines for the functioning of the financial intelligence units And we will also be able to advise the European Commission and the Parliament for the development of technical standards and further regulatory interventions. Ambition 3. AMLA has the remit to conduct investigations to selected obliged entities and impose fines. It will also be able to ask national regulators to conduct investigations to non-obliged entities. If AMLA is not content with the response of the national financial supervisor, then it will have the remit to intervene, act as investigator, and again impose fines. What does this mean for the industry? In theory, at least, more cross-border consistency is good for the firms who are among the obliged entities. So the expected impact is higher to entities with presence in multiple member states in the European Union. The harmonization of the process implies that firms will need to harmonize the AML compliance standards cross-border. If a firm is located in a member state with comparatively weaker AML regime, this comparative benefit, if I may, will be lifted, and significant changes have to be made within these firms, operationally speaking. This is locally troublesome, but globally good, as this will ensure a level playing field in the European Union. Now, cost-wise, firms will need to pay particular attention to the changes we see here and dedicate resources that will prepare them to face the enhanced supervisory presence of AMLA. This is the new institution. And this is the new guy in the room, the main dish of the menu today, the anti-money laundering regulation, the new rule book that will be uniformly implemented cross-border without deviations among the member states. Again, we expect this to be effective by 2024. I have a question mark over there because this is the expectation of the Commission. The Council and the Parliament may delay a little bit their response in the adoption, but we will speak about this later. Many things here, and to organize the content of this new regulation, I try to organize the changes into meaningful groups. Group number 1. In the list of the obliged entities you remember from AMLD 4 and 5, now add few more types of firms, starting from credit institutions that are not banks, the new crowdfunding platforms, the crypto asset firms and funds, and a category that is not included in FATF, the investment migration operators, the ones who are the intermediates between Chinese or Russian oligarchs and the states. And these people buy assets in a country in exchange of a passport. So this is the new category, and the regulation will also apply to those who trade or act as intermediaries in the trade of artworks. In one sentence, it seems that everything that is included in the asset liquidity line we will see later is part of the anti-money laundering regulation, making it the AML regulation of everything. Group of changes number 2, governance. Today we have entities that allocate the AML responsibilities to individuals, ad hoc teams, or employees who do several things, especially smaller firms. Well, from now on, every firm will need to designate an AML compliance manager with specific tasks to implement everything related to AML obligations. The regulation defines also the role of the compliance officer. AML also obliges entities to dedicate financial resources for the AML tasks, for staff, and related supporting technologies. Group of changes number 3, a new list. So far, Commission has a list of high-risk third countries. The list is expected to be enriched by a new list of countries with compliance weaknesses. Why this is important? Because if an entity operates in these countries, this will trigger the requirement for enhanced due diligence, EDD. The AMLR also provides definitions on control and beneficial ownership. Now, each member states defines, it has its own definition about control, but with the adoption of the AMLR, everybody is going to have unified definitions. We also have the introduction of a threshold of 10,000 euros. If a transaction is higher than this threshold, CDD immediately applies. The threshold is 1,000 euros for any crypto assets firm, and this is amended in the transfer of funds regulation we will see later. Another major issue in the AMLR is the outsourcing of the customer due diligence that many firms do. Today, most of the investment companies and other firms outsource CDD, especially to providers of technical solutions who monitor clients in an ongoing basis, especially when it comes to sanctioned persons and sanctioned financial instruments, which is a major point of concern for asset managers. The regulation includes also a list of prohibitions for tasks that should not be outsourced. For example, it's prohibited to outsource the criteria of if you are going to onboard a client or not. Finally, we have the reporting obligations. The AMLR comes here with much detail with respect to suspicious transaction reports and suspicious activity reports. If you are an investment firm, you will be required to respond to the requests of the financial intelligence units within 5 days, or even in 24 hours if necessary. If you are a small firm and you have only one incident, it's more or less controllable. But major firms facing multiple requests for STR and SAR, this could have significant impact. Practically, this means that your firm will not be allowed to carry out any transaction unless you have the consent by the financial intelligence unit. This means that if your firm resides in a member state with strong compliance requirements, this is fine. You get used to this kind of relationship with your FIU. But if you reside in a country with relatively more relaxed requirements, this is going to force you to make adjustments from an operational point of view. Next step, the sequel, AMLD6. It seems that anti-money laundering directives are endless in the European Union. The good news here is that the major change in AMLD6 is just the coordination and the standards of operation for the financial intelligence units within the EU. Again, it's expected to be effective by 2024. There are 3 new dimensions here. First, this AMLD6 attempts to provide clarity in the relationship between the obliged entities and the financial intelligence units. Second, it is expected to allow better coordination between the financial intelligence units. And third, it sets clear requirements regarding the management and the maintenance of the financial intelligence unit net, which is now transferred from Europol to the anti-money laundering authority. The first and most important change in the AMLD6 from the industry's point of view is the method for analysis and detection of suspicious transactions. This will also include training and other means of assistance to the obliged entities, as well as support for the interaction between firms and the financial intelligence units. If your firm is an obliged entity, this is good news, as you will have now clarity and standardization regarding your obligations and the expectations in your relationship with the financial intelligence unit. From an operational point of view regarding the FIUs, the member states will have clear obligations to maintain information and statistics regarding the reports and activities of the FIUs, as well as a record and type of the offenses detected. Finally, there is no such thing as an EU regulation proposed by the Commission unless we have a central database. AMLD6 establishes a centralized automated mechanism that will allow the immediate access of FIUs to information about bank account holders. There is hope that these changes will address challenges we now face in the coordination and the cooperation of FIUs across EU. And the last part of the new package is the new transfer of funds regulation. I call it the new old thing because European Commission was lazy this time. Instead of introducing a brand new framework for the new best of crypto assets, it tried to force this new innovation to an old box. So instead of having this new regulation, we have an update of the already existing transfer of funds regulation. The idea here is to transpose in a uniform way the FATF recommendations of crypto assets in the EU law. Again, it's expected to be effective by 2024. The main topics of this file that I think is of strategic importance for the future of Gibraltar as well is that we take not the definition of FATF of what is a virtual asset service provider, but we have a little bit wider definition. We call it crypto asset service provider. It means that in markets and crypto assets regulation, the two definitions do not coincide, creating some sort of disadvantage for the European CASPs compared to VASPs. Another major problem here is that the initial draft of the regulation exclude unhosted wallets. This is not in FATF. Today, according to the introduction of the regulation of the Commission, somebody, a VASP, a CASP, should accept funds only from another CASP, living outside unhosted wallets. I know that there is an effort from the Council and from the European Parliament to include unhosted wallets in this regulation. It's a very painful discussion that takes place right now. We will see how it will go. Another major omission of this effort to transpose FATF recommendation in the European Union law is that we don't have provision of know your VASP in the initial recommendation of the Commission. It means that the VASPs are not required in this stage to have a counterpart due diligence. This is something that the Parliament now tries to correct. Another point that is going to have a lot of impact, positive impact, is that we have the dimension of know your transaction. You know, a 500 or 150 euro bill can change hands. After the change of 3 persons, you don't know who was 4 steps behind, but with the crypto assets, you can track back to the blockchain. So know your transaction addresses not the problem of know your customer, which is in the center of the FATF recommendations, but also what kind of quality of asset you have. Was your asset involved in ransomware 2 steps behind? Should the VASP accept this contaminated Bitcoin? This is a provision that is about to be introduced by the European Parliament as well. And finally, we have a threshold of 1,000 euros. This replicates the views of FATF. However, both the Council and the European Parliament, for the time being, intend to remove completely this threshold of 1,000 euros, requiring customer due diligence from the first euro. This is also a painful story that we expect to create passionate debates in the European Parliament and in the trilogues later. And with this, I conclude the description of what is the new anti-money laundering package. And I was asked to explain how things really work, because what I just described you is not 100% accurate. This is the text of the regulation we now have. This text is about to change the next 6 to 12 months. Because, you know, European Union is a strange beast. The European Parliament is the only parliament other than the Parliament of North Korea that is not allowed to introduce law. It is the Commission that introduces law and delivers this proposal of a new regulation to the Parliament and to the Council. These two bodies amend the regulation according to what they have in their mind. And then we have a third step called the trialogue negotiations. It's a place that people from the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission meet. They bring their texts and they negotiate in endless sessions. And sometimes they lock the door for 36 hours until we reach an agreement. After we have the agreement reached, we have the adoption of the law. I made some pictures from a trialogue that I participated. This is the room that the trialogue usually takes place in the 5th floor of the European Parliament. In the left side is usually the Council, and the right side is usually the Commission, and in the two main parts is the negotiators from the European Parliament. And then picture in the right hand is one of the trialogues that I participated here. I was negotiator for the European Parliament on the European Fund for Strategic Investments. The Vice President of the Commission comes to congratulate me after the reach of the conclusion of the new regulation. So, where are we standing in the adoption line right now? The regulation was introduced by the European Commission by July 2020, and we are here in the moment that both the Parliament and the Council draft their own texts. We expect later this year trialogues to take place. How fast? It depends on how fast these two institutions will adopt their texts. And it is expected that by 2024, these new regulations are going to be adopted. What this means for the industry? We don't know exactly what is going to be the requirement for the industry in this stage. But the regime, as we see it so far, is not a paradigm shift. I told you in the beginning, I don't see many changes. We just have updates and some clarification and a little bit more detail and more requirements. No surprises. We need to adapt to the new beast. We need to dedicate resources for the new beast. We need to respond to the new cost function we have in order to comply because of the proximity to the regulator, to our firm. My suggestion was to pay close attention to the fourth part, which is about the transposition of FATF recommendations, because it seems that the tokenization of value is an enabling technological options that transforms the asset liquidity line we traditionally know in our work in every aspect. We have instruments that are related to cash and cash equivalents that are disrupted by cryptocurrencies and stable coins and CBDCs in the future. European Union is already on its way to introduce its digital euro, which most probably is going to be programmable. We have the security tokens, which aspire to tokenize stocks, bonds, derivatives, and alternative assets. And we also have non-fungible assets that tokenize the value of real estate and artwork, also parts of alternative assets, with very low liquidity. But in some cases, artwork with NFTs is 300 times more liquid. So if Gibraltar wants to become a hub that is going to be in the center of this tokenization of value across the line of the asset liquidity line, then I believe that the Brussels effect the capacity of Brussels and the EU regulations to affect the regulations of third countries, especially of smaller ones, this is something that Gibraltar needs to take into consideration in order not to deviate a lot from the anti-money laundering provisions of the European Union. And this, in my view, is something that we should approach in a two-pillar way. We have a dimension of alignment and a dimension of search for a competitive advantage for Gibraltar. Alignment. Needless to say that the expectation of equivalence is not close enough. So, in a world without equivalence, the first thing Gibraltar should do is to avoid to be included in the list of the third countries that have compliance weaknesses. Second, I suggest to make all the necessary regulatory updates to create a quasi-equivalent regime vis-à-vis the new anti-money laundering regulation. And third, emphasize on the operations of the Gibraltar's Financial Intelligence Unit and communicate to the European Union the compatibility of the FIU of Gibraltar to the network of FIUs of the European Union, as well as communicate your intention to cooperate with the anti-money laundering authority. Now, in terms of competitive advantage, I locate all the sources of competitive advantage in the inefficiencies of the proposal of the European Commission regarding the crypto assets. This deviation between FATF and the European Union's TFR is a strong opportunity for Gibraltar to be addressed, because you can be globally compliant and have minimum standards of what is expected from entities working in the field of crypto assets without inheriting the problems of the European Union's regulation. Unless in the coming months, European Parliament and the European Council change their mind and strive for more compliance with the FATF instead of having extra layers of obligations. This is all from my side. Thank you very much. And let's start the discussion. Alan.
Dimitrios, thank you very, very much. A very insightful presentation there. And I'm sure it has got a lot of people's minds thinking about the implications for the new AMLA and how we as a jurisdiction should really think through what our next steps will be to respond to that in terms of adoption, etc. I'm just looking at the Q&A. I know we have one question seeking a clarification there from something that you mentioned. But before we do get to that, I just want to ask the audience to please submit your questions to the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to them. Just to kick off, I had a couple of notes on my side. I think you really reiterated the point of us trying to avoid being labelled a country with inherent compliance weakness. For me, this is certainly something that we should aspire as a jurisdiction not to be branded as. The question that arises from that is, how do we go about avoiding that, and what control can we exert to ensure that we don't end up as a country which is labelled as one displaying compliance weakness? I think the first point that I would like you to see whether you could offer some insight into is, what is actually compliance weakness? Is it what kind of test is that? And secondly, is it just as much as just taking on board as much of the framework locally as possible, which is going to ensure we don't get there?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. Well, there are two ways to answer this question. The first is the very straightforward way. We don't know. Why? Because the European Commission first started with a message to send within the European Union. There are jurisdictions like Malta, like Ireland, like Cyprus, that do not follow the rigorous procedures we see in Denmark, in Germany, in Austria. So they wanted to say that to major players of the industry that, okay, the era that of the AMLD that allowed you to choose the optimal jurisdiction in order to allocate yourself belongs to the past. So the first message was within the European Union. We have a very bad record in the European Union in implementing the anti-money laundering directive. For example, the AMLD 5, which is already in place, is not fully adopted by 10 member states. 10 member states. And we have fines imposed by the European Commission to the member states, and member states say, okay, the gains we have from not implementing it are higher than paying the fee, so we will not implement it. So these gray jurisdictions, not black, gray jurisdictions will belong to the past with this harmonization, as AMLD is gonna be only about financial intelligence units. The AMLR is the big game. Of course, this opens the opportunity for certain groups in European Union and certain parties of the European Union, for example, the socialists, who spot jurisdictions like Gibraltar as tax havens, to say, okay, they do not cooperate. We put a barrier to cooperation, which is that high instead of that high. So it's an opportunity for us to screw the screwdriver in order to make them more compliant. Otherwise, isolate them. So according to the European Commission, it's strict implementation of what is in the law. They do not have a list yet, but if you act proactively and you say, okay, we saw what you are doing over there, and say to Albert Hizola, yeah, I'm going to have a trip, and I will tell you that I'm reading what you're saying, and we have already in place a new regulation which is going to be compatible. It's already a good thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dimitrios. We've got some questions coming in. I'm going to do my best to get through these right now. The first one was, as you were going through your presentation, we had an attendee who was seeking a bit of clarification on what the UBO and control changes were in regards to AMLR. He wanted to actually know if you could clarify those for him.
Okay, the ultimate beneficiary owner, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, for the time being, every member state has its own definition about what is the ultimate beneficiary owner and what is the concept of control. And this goes hand in hand with other things like what is the definition of security per se. So the anti-money laundering regulation, as it stands right now, tries to address these deviations of definitions by providing a definition of two kinds: control through ownership interest, and a new definition called control via other means. So I cannot be very detailed on what this is going to be and what is the impact of that, because of course every member state will strive to protect its own definition. Give us some time to see how the member states responding to that, and happy to come up with a detailed email to the colleague on how the negotiations go in this respect. Unfortunately, I cannot provide more information on that other than what they might right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Dimitrios. I'm just going to clarify that as the questions coming in, I'm not seeing the names of the individuals submitting the questions, so they're coming across
They are
as
anonymous.
they're coming across as anonymous. I'm not too sure what the reason for that is, whether it's again a problem with the tech setup with Zoom today. But anyway, we're going to go through them. I've got another question here for you, Dimitrios, is whether, in your opinion, Gibraltar is actually compromising on AML and CFT standards.
I don't have opinion.
I'm happy to take that one, Alan.
Okay, Ernest.
I'm
There's a lot of
closer to the Gibraltar regime than Dimitrios is, although I think you already have a very good understanding of how Gibraltar operates and what we have in place. But at the moment, I think from a technical perspective, Gibraltar is doing everything possible to ensure that it doesn't compromise on those standards. And as a small jurisdiction, we can move very fast to make sure that we implement whatever changes are necessary. At least from a FATF perspective, Gibraltar definitely aims not to compromise anything from an AML perspective. But I'm sure some will appreciate that as a small jurisdiction as well, we do have issues with resources, and from an effectiveness point of view. I think there's some evidence, obviously, with the current negotiations around Manival, that there may be some concerns that in practice, firms and authorities may not be doing enough to satisfy those requirements. So yeah, I think that maybe answers part of the question, but I think as a jurisdiction, I think we are quite proactive in making sure that we don't compromise AML from an AML perspective.
Thank you, Ernest, for that. Dimitrios, I don't know whether you were going to say anything else. I've got another question for you. Maybe you can offer a bit of insight here to us and the rest of the attendees, which is more about the institution itself, the AMLA, right? As you highlighted, it's going to be a new institution. I was wondering, is there a comparable institution outside of the EU on which this is being modeled, or is this, in your experience, a totally new institution for these processes and for these regulations?
Ernest, correct me if I'm wrong, but this anti-money laundering responsibilities, for example, in the United States, is within the hands of SEC, right? So yes, it's something new. There is an effort to say that we are very serious about AMLA, and to express this seriousness, we are going to create a new player here that is going to have intervention rights that the previous European supervisory authorities did not have. And it's so strong that even if the member state does not comply, it steps in and enforces fines, no matter if the member state wants it or not. This is a very strong message. And again, we don't know how much of these ambitions are going to end up in the final text.
And just to add a little bit there, I think the main difference, I guess, is that even though there's been some authorities at the moment that have taken some of those functions to date, the proposal is that there's a dedicated authority that will have a more targeted approach to all of this. And yes, in principle, at the moment, based on the proposals, the idea is that there will be a lot more focus on ensuring that cooperation across the EU, and this new authority will supposedly intervene a lot more if necessary.
Great. Both. Thank you very much, Ernest. Thank you, Dimitrios. I'm looking at the Q&A, and I noticed that we've had some statements rather than questions. I'm not too sure whether it makes much sense to take those. More on the clarification of your opinion of us being sort of as a tax haven, which I think Ernest has already answered. I'm not too sure how much worth it's going to be re-looking at that and covering that again. I think, Dimitrios, you've already voiced pretty clearly that it's not something that you have necessarily an opinion on at this stage. Okay.
If I may, Alan, let me say
Yeah.
something, because I remember the rumors in the corridors of the European Parliament. European Union in a constant effort to find tax havens and punish them. And in the spirit of Brexit, they were trying to show to UK, and this is the problem with Gibraltar. It's not that Gibraltar does something wrong, but sometimes, especially socialist colleagues from the UK, raise this issue. It's not the Spanish, it's not the Greeks, it's not the Germans who denoted Gibraltar as a tax haven, were British MEPs from the Socialist Party. So,
okay.
And I think Alan, Dimitrios said something that may have given the impression that he believed that Gibraltar was a tax haven, but he was talking more about the perception of people out there that we are still a tax haven, and unfortunately we still get some of that as well.
That was clear,
but we are clearly not anymore.
That was clear to me, that what he was voicing was a take of something that he had sensed outside, and it wasn't necessarily his opinion. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Look, if I may, I can't see any more questions there. If there are any more questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, I'm also happy to draw a line under this presentation, which once again I'd like to thank you on behalf of JIFIA for your contributions too. We're very grateful to Xray for today's content. Again, it's been really insightful. So thank you both, Ernest. Thank you, Dimitrios. It's been great to have you presenting here today, and I look forward to our next presentation when that may be. Okay. Just one final clarification that's just popped up. Yes, a recording is available. Just please email JIFIA info@jifia.gi if you can't happen to be directed to that through our website. Okay.
And Alan, if anyone has any questions at any point, feel free to send any emails to either JIFIA or one of us. We've got our website, xray.consulting, where you can find all of our details. So anything related to the EU AML or any other subject that we may be able to help, we would be very happy to answer.
Perfect. And I know they'd be in good hands going to you. Okay.
All
right. Take care, everybody. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.